Good evening, listeners and viewers to TDN and This Week in Interview. Welcome to this week's episode of This Week in Interview with your host, Anthony Drago. It's always a pleasure to be with you on this day. And of course, for the last 2 weeks, and then this is the third week, we're doing a special. We are doing a 2-hour program from 7 p.m. Eastern Standard Time to 9 p.m. And tonight we are doing 2 hours, but we are devoting the entire 2 hours to the developments going on in Dominica vis-a-vis the elections. So welcome everyone. Welcome to you, my regular listeners. I hope that you have been finding the discussions that we're doing helpful to understand the situation. I want you to share the live, whether you're watching us on Facebook or on tdntv.net. On Facebook, we are on This Week in Interview Facebook page, as well as TDN Radio Facebook page. We are on YouTube, TDN Network 1 on YouTube. And so if you don't do Facebook, you can do tdntv.net, and you can also do YouTube, TDN Network 1. And if you do Facebook, then you go to TDN Radio Facebook page, as well as This Week in Interview Facebook page. So welcome. I want you to share the live. If you're listening to us from Dominica, we want to say hi to you, to our fans from RV, Our Jams Radio, carries This Week in Interview live on DigiPlay channel 59. Also, we are streaming live on Roku. We are on Twitter, and are we on Instagram? All the digits are there on the screen. Okay, so you can see all the places where you can see us. Share the live, and if you go to YouTube or the other channels, you can follow us so that you get notifications when we are on. So welcome everyone. Tonight I have a very special program for you, because as I said, we do This Week in Interview different from the other programs out there. We've been doing it for 12 years. And so what we try to do is to make sure that we bring you the perspective of current affairs, but from a different angle, from what you would experience if you were simply clicking your remote or your mouse and just consuming regular social media. For the last 3 weeks, we've been doing the 7 o'clock hour, and I've been calling it the resistance, saying that we are ready for the resistance. But resistance to what? On November 6th, the Prime Minister of Dominica just unceremoniously announced that he was going to dissolve the parliament the next morning, and he was going to advise the president to dissolve the House and to call elections, which he wanted to card, which he's requesting to card on December 6th. All of us were taken aback and we were shocked. While he was making that announcement, folks were losing their relatives on the east. Folks were losing their property on the east. People were frightened to stay in their homes because they were being threatened by high rivers, floods, landslides. And in that environment, that announcement, needed to say, came unexpected. The government have since characterized it as catching the opposition with their pants down. But if that were the case, it would seem like he caught the entire country with its pants down, so to speak. And so we've been exploring that. We've been pushing back, because most of us, our ancestors were brought here and enslaved from Africa. The Kalinago people and the other indigenous people who occupied the land were pretty much decimated, almost extinct. Dominica, being what it is, its ruggedness, managed to help the Kalinago survive the initial brutality. And they came here, so they were enslaved, they were brutalized, they were victimized. And after lots of blood and sweat and tears, they managed to gain wrestle control of these islands and pass it on to us. Maybe we are 3-4 generations in from that. And so it pains me personally. I know a lot of you, to see what is happening in the islands, where we seem to have governments who are bent on being strongmen, who are bent on being dictators, who are bent on staying in power forever, not because they think that they can do a better job than another person, because they enjoy the perks, they enjoy the privilege of being prime minister, being a minister, and so on. And therefore, they are bent on remaining in power at any means, any cost necessary. And so when something like what just happened happens, we as citizens want to turn to the law. We want to turn to our constitution. We want to turn to the systems that's supposed to work to guard us against, I call them scoundrels, but folks who have a distorted moral compass, who manage to gain control of our countries. And so we all turn to the legal profession, we turn to the lawyers, we turn and say, what can we do to bring some reason to the situation? What can we do to stop the process or slow it down, or at least let our voices be heard, let our considerations be taken into account? And we were told by almost everybody that there's nothing that can be done. The prime minister is supreme. If he advises the president to issue the writ and the writ has been issued, there's nothing that the courts can do. And so that we found that incredulous. We found that to be unimaginable, that we as a country, we as a people are helpless. Does it mean that the only result we have in situations like this is to go against the law, is to exercise real civil disobedience, is to disrupt, to be disruptive so that we can be heard? What kind of constitution that we have that doesn't give a relief valve, so to speak, so that when our people are tense and when the majority of people feel like what is happening should not happen, it shouldn't even have to be a majority. When a significant portion of people feel that their voice is not being heard, that there are circumstances in the constitution that provides no recourse for these folks. And so we've been bringing it to you. Anybody, obviously, we call it the resistance, so there's no guessing or there's no bashfulness about which side we're on. But we try to bring it to you in an informative way. And so that brings me to my guest that I have on this evening. Initially, when the announcement was made, the major political parties and most of the opposition forces said that they would not participate in the election because there were so many years that reform was being touted by very qualified people, that the elections in Dominica are not free and fair because we have a tainted list, the process is flawed, and so on. It's outdated, it's outmoded, and whatnot. And so we said that we wanted to mount a resistance to that. And so the first time we brought you what was happening, we brought some guests on, we told you about the demonstration that took place last week Thursday, the day before nominations. We saw thousands of the people on the Bayfront, and we wondered what happened, what was going to happen, but the nominations went on Friday unhindered. And so here we are. Some of the folks who initially said no elections with no reform, they thought it was wise to jump in and to at least register themselves as nominations so we could buy a few more weeks. Because if nobody had contested and the Labour Party had contested all the seats and nobody opposed them, they would automatically have been declared winners of all the seats. And so they would form the government. And so a few people decided that was a cumbersome situation to be in, and so they put themselves up at nomination so that at least to force elections in a few constituencies. And so the Labour Party was able to go uncontested into 6 seats, and there are 5 seats, 5 seats where there are going to be elections. Because, well, there's more than 5 actually. There was actually, I think, independent candidates in 12 constituencies. But I guess what you needed was enough so that the Labour Party could not automatically assume to have been able to win 11 seats. And so I have one of the gentlemen who jumped in, by his name of Tyrone Nicholas. We know him as Flacco. We see him on the front lines all the time. And he was one of the folks who said initially that there would be no elections without reform, and then pivoted at the last minute and got himself nominated in the Rosa North constituency. So I want to talk to him about that change of strategy, if you want to call it that, change of thinking. And also, now that he's a candidate, talk to him about his candidacy and what he's going to offer. My other guest tonight is Justice Justin Simon, very well recognized and high-level counsel for the law. He has practiced in Dominica, and now he practices in Antigua. But he's known throughout the region. He works throughout the region, and very accomplished attorney. And so we reached out to him to ask him if he would come on, and so that we could have a professional guidance, a professional opinion about what are the options that we folks have in dealing with such a situation. And so we have both. We have the professional that can tell us, we look at our constitution and say, why is our constitution quote unquote useless in this situation? And we also have a young man who has been pushing and fighting for change, and we want to talk to him. So join me in giving a very warm welcome to my guest tonight, Mr. Tyrone Nicholas. I know him as Flacco. I consider him activist, but now I have to introduce him as candidate for the Rosa North constituency, and Justice Justin Simon. Welcome, gentlemen. It's a pleasure to have you on. I hope Justice Simon will allow me to give indulgence to the youth, and go first to the young man, Mr. Tyrone Nicholas. Welcome to This Week in Interview. It's a pleasure to have you, Flacco.
Thank you, Anthony. Yes, I can hear you. And thank you for having me. I welcome the discussion, and I'm hoping to hear a few of the other perspectives, in regards to how we move forward, and what strategy or what plans we might employ in maneuvering our way out of this predicament that we have found ourselves in.
All right, awesome. It's good to have you. Some of the folks online, Dave Bertrand, good night. Mali Ostri, good night to everyone. Veronica Pascal, blessed evening to your guests. Good evening to all the folks, and all of you who haven't made comments. I don't see your name, but welcome. I'm really looking forward to tonight's discussion. Justice Justin Simon, it's the first time that you are on This Week in Interview. Very warm welcome to you. It's nice to have you.
I think he's
muted. Is your mic muted?
Thank you for drawing that to my attention. My apologies. And I wish to say good evening to you and to our listeners, as well as to my co-guest, independent candidate. And I'm quite happy to share my own views, to hear the views of others, and for us to look at this process in a very informed and enlightened manner.
Yes, it's great to have you. And tonight we have a 2-hour. Normally my program is a 1-hour session, but from the day that this was announced, I had guests already lined up for like the first 3 shows. So I did an hour earlier so we could talk about this and then go to my regular guest. And then tonight we're lucky enough to have 2 hours available to us. And so I think we will have time to really go into some detail, because there are so many questions surrounding the whole issue. A lot of it we don't understand. And social media is a blessing, but sometimes it can be a curse, because then you see everybody becomes a lawyer overnight. Everybody becomes a political expert, a political scientist. And so sometimes it's difficult to know what to believe and to draw rational lines between what is happening and the explanation for it. But I'm going to go to Flacco. And I'm going to call you Flacco for the night, even if for the folks who are known, every once in a while, I will mention your Christian name, Tyrone Nicholas. But Flacco, I mean, you are with the Moonsewe group, and so folks who follow would know of some of your activism and your brave and courageous standing up to the system. Not even so much that you are disruptive, but Moonsewe says everybody should have a copy of the Constitution and everybody should know their rights and everybody should understand that they can stand up for their rights. And so I want you to introduce yourself to the listeners and the viewers. Tell them who you are and what you stand for in a general way in this whole fight. And we will have time to drill in into the details, but just give them a very good sense as to who Tyrone Nicholas is.
Okay. Well, I'll give you a quick condensed version. You know, I am a child of the 70s. I was born in 78. And, you know, during those times, it was the ending of the time of milk and honey, and then the transition into the cellular age and the information age. You know, those were the days when we didn't have cell phones and color television was just coming in. And my mother often told me that, you know, I was a blessed child because I had the best of both worlds. Because the way I would put it is that one of my grandmothers was the household helper for my other grandmother. So on one side, I had family who was not so well off. And on the other side, I had family who were, you know, we was one of the first set of people to have television. And having families overseas sending all these the latest toys and stuff for us. So I appreciate what it is to be one of those who have and one of those who don't have. A lot of people might not be able to relate to let's say when we use the term like pot jam and those kind of things. There we a lot of people, especially now the young people, cannot relate to that. A lot of them maybe don't even, you know. So when I look at the stark contrast that is presented now in our society, and you know, I've always questioned why is it that people who have come from these humble beginnings and have gone out there and seen the world, basically have educated themselves, have become enlightened, and come home, and instead of using that experience to uplift the people who have been almost, I would say right now, almost trapped in you know, in this, what I call is a nightmare right now, because it's a power struggle essentially in Dominica, you know, and it's the people who are caught in the middle. A lot of not even understanding some of the conversations that are going on, which have everything to do with their lives, you know, policies being discussed, and all of these things are going over the head of the common man, and it has all evolved into basically the only thing having value is money. And even to the point where I essentially asked one of our legal experts, what is it in Dominica that guarantees me my rights, or guarantees that my rights are protected? Is there any independent mechanism to safeguard my rights? And he essentially replied that it's you have to pay to go through the system. Now, the average man living day to day in the society will not pay attention to these things, because we have the notion that we have these honorable men who are gracing the halls of our parliament, and debating these issues and ensuring that we are choosing the path that is of the best interest to every man, woman, and child, whether he is the luminary or whether he's the man on the streets picking up the garbage, you know. I have not seen that kind of statesmanship emerging from this generation. It seems that, you know, honor honor is a thing that is forgotten. Statesmanship is a thing that is forgotten, and we essentially equate value to monetary and liquid, you know, that liquid cash in our hand. But I am of the belief, and the school of my upbringing is that there is greater value in relationships as opposed to money. And when we let money become the core value of our society, everything else suffers. You know, our relationships break down, and the things that are communal, that are for the common good of everybody, they get neglected and derelicted. And then, you know, the first people in the society who suffer are the most vulnerable. It's almost shameful to see that, you know, we are not for want of innovators. But I keep saying that when you take away the academic, the technical training, the skills training from the, and you basically you put ideology into their minds, you give them academics, then essentially you've left them with idea but no tools to drive that idea, because academics often needs financing, and we see the way that things are not, there's no equity really in the society. Okay. So that's just a few of the challenges I see.
I want you to speed up a little bit, and so what you're saying that drove you into that public sphere is the lack of the opportunity.
Is this is the common man not having an understanding of the issues that directly are affecting them. So now that we have stood up as independent candidates, I think this has spurred a lot of people to actually begin to inform themselves on what really is reform. What is it that we are asking for? If we a lot of people have not really considered the implications of having no one being nominated on the nomination day. You know that we have, and we say that we live life in hindsight. So now that nomination day has come and gone, and we are here basically on the cusp of what could be just a continuation of the norm, or it could be a total revolution. But for, you know, we need everybody to be at a place right now where they are informed, and they are informed to make the decision that is most beneficial.
That is better for them, and that is what we're here to do tonight, is to inform them. Let me go to Justice Justin Flacco for a minute.
Sure.
Justin Simon, I want you to start at a higher level, and just paint a picture for us. Why we, so many of us, try to look to our constitution for help and for rescue, and we felt unsheltered by the constitution, in the sense that so many of us felt wronged and aggrieved by this announcement of an election. And we as a people, not everybody, because some people support the party and support whatever it is, they see it as a strategy for their party to remain in power, but a significant number of Dominicans felt aggrieved. And the first thing that pops in your head is, maybe you could take the government to court, or take the system to court, and try to buy yourself some time, or to get a fair hearing. And we're being told that there's nothing that we can do about it. As somebody who is involved in the law for so many years, what do you say to me that will save me from just totally thinking that my constitution is useless and unprotecting me at this point.
Okay, thank you very much. Let us first of all recognize that the Constitution is the supreme law in the country, so that any law passed by Parliament which conflicts with the Constitution can be declared null and void by the court once that law is challenged.
Right.
Now, your Constitution does not speak to everything. It basically addresses fundamental rights and freedoms and the protection which is given to every individual. For example, protection from inhuman treatment, protection from deprivation of property, assumption that one is innocent until found guilty. These are your basic fundamental rights. And then the Constitution speaks to the various elements of government. The President, the Parliament, your ministers of government who are appointed by the Prime Minister. It also speaks to your constituencies, the summoning of Parliament, and how laws are passed and effected. And then it speaks to powers of the Prime Minister, the civil service, and how that is governed, particularly the persons in the higher echelon, for example, your permanent secretary, your director of public prosecution. And it also establishes a police service commission and a public service commission, which addresses the appointment of those respective persons and deals with their discipline and their disappointment. And it also establishes your various court systems and procedures. Now, it's like everything else, as I often say to persons. It's one thing passing a law and having it on the books, but it is also important that those persons who are in authority act in the best interests of the people who they serve. And you may well have laws that are beneficial, but if the persons who are authorized to implement those laws are not themselves acting in good faith, then you will find that your laws, I don't want to say that they're useless, but your laws become basically placed aside by those particular persons in authority. And your redress is to go to the courts. But how many persons take that opportunity to go to the courts? Particularly when you've got your whole process, your High Court, your Court of Appeal, and now in Dominica, you have your Caribbean Court of Justice as your final appeal court. It takes time, it takes money, so it will all depend upon the importance of the matter that you're going to be dealing with and the funds that you have available to be able to carry that fight through the whole legal process. Let me say that our Constitution in Dominica came into effect on the attainment of independence, Republican status in 1978. Prior to that, of course, you had a constitution, but it was Dominica was basically a self-governing country, but still under the colonial yardstick. Now with the Constitution of 1978, we are in a more independent position in respect of addressing our issues and ensuring that the populace not only develop but also informed and become very much aware of their own rights as well as their responsibilities throughout. So it's a process. We've got to recognize also that our colonial powers, Great Britain, is the country that thrust the Constitution on us. And I think at this time and period, it is important that we look at that Constitution to determine whether we should not have constitutional reform so that your Constitution is more in keeping with your society's aspirations, because we've had experiences, like we're now having that experience in respect of a snap election being called, and clearly because the Constitution allows for the Prime Minister to advise the President at any time to call an election, notwithstanding the fact that elections basically are every 5 years. So 5 years is the maximum term of a government in office. But within that 5 years, the Prime Minister can clearly call elections as he wishes. And one of the issues we now have to address is whether that power or that right ought to continue, and whether we should not have a reform to allow the Prime Minister to call elections only within 6 months of the term limit of 5 years, except if there is an emergency, war, illness, things of that nature. So I think it is important now, especially as our youth are more educated, more informed, travel more, that based upon our prevailing experience, we need to look at the various provisions in our Constitution and determine whether or not there should be reform which is necessary to ensure that the democratic process within our country is strengthened and persons feel more in tune with what is happening in terms of their rights and obligations being fulfilled.
So, thank you for that. Now, both you and Flacco spoke about, well, you alluded to having honorable people apply law and enforce the law. And you also use the word advice. The Prime Minister advises the President to call an election. Advice to me, and tell me if I'm wrong, advice to me says that there is some room for the President to express some kind of discretion. Are there special circumstances where the President can exercise discretion despite the advice that he's given by the Prime Minister?
Unfortunately, that is not so. There are certain areas where the President can exercise his own discretion. And in those circumstances, he does not seek or act on the advice of the Prime Minister or any Minister of Government. But in substance and essentially, the President is really a figurehead as head of the executive, and for most of what duties he has, he needs to perform them upon the advice of cabinet, the particular Minister of Government, or the Prime Minister.
Or the Prime Minister. Okay.
Let me say this. That does not mean, let me say this, that does not mean that if the Prime Minister comes over to the President and the President thinks what he's being asked to do is not in the best interest, that the President can certainly speak with the Prime Minister or whoever minister is advising him and get them to rethink or to pull back from the action that they want him to take. But at the end of the day, the President has no choice but to follow the instructions or the advice that is being given to him by the minister or Prime Minister. If I read, if you just allow me to read, for example,
sure, definitely.
We look at our Constitution at section 54. It says the President may at any time prorogue or dissolve Parliament. And you go down to subsection 4. In the exercise of his powers to dissolve Parliament, the President shall act in accordance with the advice of the Prime Minister. The word shall makes it obligatory that he follows the advice. And as I said, he can very well say to the Prime Minister, I don't think that this is the time, I don't think that's the correct thing. Could you rethink it? But at the end of the day, if the Prime Minister insists and says, this is what I want done, the President has no other alternative but to follow the advice of the Prime Minister.
Right. So one of the listeners, Dave Bertrand, says, Magistrate Glasgow has already articulated that once we decided to have the elections with this bloated electoral list, we consent to the election. So Flacco, I'm going to go to you with that. You are much on the forefront of demanding electoral reform. And very early, it was said no reform, no election. However, on nomination day, you decided to accept nomination for the Roseau North seat, basically a reversal or partial reversal of that position, for which you have faced criticism. You, along with the other independent candidates, have faced criticism. I'm going to give you the opportunity to explain yourself, like to the Dominican public, those who have admired all of the activism that you and your fellow brothers in Munsewi have done, and those who are wondering, well, what happened to my soul there, Flacco? What caused that reversal of thinking?
This soul there, Flacco, is still there, you know.
It's still there.
All right, so
I'm going to give you the mic to explain to folks your thinking behind that. Mm-hmm.
The principle is still no election, no reform. Mm-hmm. You understand? What we have to ask ourselves is, hadn't anyone stood up on nomination day and present themselves, what would be the position now? Another thing I want to ask is that we must exercise democracy in its true form on both sides, both on the dominating side and in the opposition. What I'm about to say might offend some people, but it needs to be said. I believe that the independent candidates embody what it is to be independent, to not depend on anything, you know, to be unconditional, to be not situational. Okay, so on a moment's notice, we are able to rise and to stand in defense of what we believe. And we believe the action that we took was the best action to allow the people some time to understand the issue that they are facing. So, to be honest, I was expecting a statement from the United Workers' Party to say, although we are not contesting the general elections based on the premise that we do not have reforms which we have been promised, which have been denied, which is basically on the cusp of being presented to us. We have that situation being thrusted upon us. How do we respond? I do not believe the United Workers' Party can realistically expect their proclamation to command every single independent thinking Dominican to abstain from participating in the election. They cannot realistically expect that. So when somebody chooses to use their independent democratic right to do what we are doing right now, are you able to stand on the democratic rights of your own members? Where is the demonstration of democracy from the opposition to stand behind the individual thinking, the individuality of its own members? We disagree in Munsewie. We don't agree on everything. And if we were to sell ourselves as a democratic party, at least we could pretend to disagree, but agree. Because that is what it is to be democratic. And that's why we have all this problem in Dominica, because we do not understand how to disagree, but continue to be amicable and to agree, to support each other. Because essentially by saying that you don't support somebody taking $500 out of their own pockets and to find 6 people who are willing to nominate them, to not stand behind that kind of independence, how are you standing for democracy when you don't stand for that? Somebody who doesn't have the protection and the financial resources, but yet still they choose to put themselves between 2 titans, because it's the people who are suffering, for what's going on both sides.
But
who is speaking for the
people
in the? Yeah, go ahead.
We have a couple questions from the audience. I Sam, can you put it up from the People Voice on CBI? It says, so what about all the independent candidates who decided to contest, even if the main opposition, I think you addressed that. How is this going to work for consenting to the sham elections and democracy? I don't understand if one participates in the election can still claim that they are in agreement with no election, no reform. So that particular one I wanted to address. Just hold on, let me just take this other two. How does this independent democratic rights work, knowing the election is a sham election? And then another one says, the apex court, I guess they're referring to the Caribbean Court of Justice, the CCJ, went further to say that we should not go to another election with all those tactics. So for Flacco, reconcile for the folks who still don't get it from what you're saying, that how does you putting yourself as an independent candidate can still stand and say no reform, no election?
I would like to ask the Honorable Justice a question, just so we can be clear.
We keep on saying justice. It's Justin.
Justin is his first name,
Justin,
so that's why.
Justin.
Yes, okay. Justin, not justice.
My apologies.
Makes me a judge automatically.
I would like
proceed.
I would like to ask you, for the benefit of the listening audience, to explain to us what is a sovereign state. What is the definition of a sovereign state, please? I will allow you to just define that, because I am like I say, I'm not no legal luminary. I am neither a politician, but I would please just for context, yeah.
It's very simple. Nothing dealing with, too much legal means that you are independent and responsible for your governance. So in other words, it is distinct from a colonial state or country that's a colony, because you have external forces. In England, for example, when we were colonies, that made the determination as to what we ought to do. As a sovereign state, we are responsible for our own development and our own decisions without interference from outside sources.
That's sovereignty. So Flaco, go ahead now.
Okay. I just want to add on that. You spoke about force in that definition, and in my reading, what I came across is that a sovereign state is a majority party who has the authority for the legitimate use of force. My question to the people who because I stand for no election, no reform, but I am also realistic, and I want us to ask ourselves a question. Do we have a majority to authorize the legitimate use of force? Because if the president will not respond to our request, what other route other than force are we going to employ?
Go ahead,
and if we say that we tend to use force, are we an overwhelming majority?
Okay, so Justin, I'll let you engage. Go ahead.
Let me say this. I mean, to what end that you wish to use force? Because force has to be legitimately engaged, and therefore engaged by the authorities. The question which I would really like to ask of you is, to what end, or what do you see? How do you see that you're going up as an independent, putting yourself forward as an independent candidate? How does that assist the process of achieving electoral reform, which is the agenda of the opposition?
I'm going to be honest, everything in Dominica needs reforming, not just electoral reform.
Okay, but let us go step by step.
Yes, I understand the discussion you want to have about no reform, no election, but I will not discuss an issue in a vacuum. I cannot discuss an issue in a vacuum when we have institutions that we have needed, and we know we have from time. You are asking us a question. No election, no reform.
So the question I'm asking is, you're going up for elections as an independent. What do you intend to achieve, or what do you hope to achieve in terms of the progress or process of reform?
I guess it's the same question that I asked, where I said, okay.
Well, I'm going to tell you. When I go to buy my bread, hold on. When I go to buy my bread, and I go with $5, and it's free bread for $5. I know it's not two bread for $5. I know it's free bread for $5. And when I go in the shop and I pay you my $5, and you tell me you're going to give me two bread, So what you think I should do for my my other bread I have?
Okay, so
other bread that you did not get.
Okay, so
yes, my other bread, because I think the president and the authorities and the failing institutions is what is causing the anxiety in Dominica. Before we even had the failure of electoral reform, we had the failure of the Electoral Commission, Duncan Stowe, sitting there and not picking up a broom to do what is fundamentally basic routine operation inside of the electoral office. We should not be waiting on Dennis Byron to tell us that we need to clean an electoral list. That should be done. That should be maintained. We live in 2022. So we're talking about firing ministers of parliament for non-performance, but we're not talking about firing the Electoral Commission or asking them to resign so that we can get the reforms that we need.
Okay, so
how does your going up as an independent assist the process?
Because Justin, I want free bread, $5. I speaking for everybody to understand, because right now, when you go to the bakery with $5, you get free bread. So if I go and pay at the electoral office for a package, part of that package is a free and fair. You know. I want Dominicans to choose, and I want us to choose, and we can have peace, because peace is my objective. You know. Hold on, I want us to be clear. The key word, and I said that on Thursday, you know, on first expected simulation, you know, I expected a simulation where we would, because we have the police, we had the permission of the police, so we would engage in a simulation with the police. Okay, we would march to the electoral office with the police to ensure that the common man with no party stepping up as an independent can get his free bread. So in the absence of that, and anybody deciding to that and knowing full well that the proclamation of the Youth Workers Party command every single man, woman, and child in Dominica, knowing that there will be people who will present themselves, I choose to be one of them, to give the people the opportunity to understand what is going on, and they are being shorted of a bread. Because it.
Okay,
I'm
so
just
I want to
ironic.
jump in here. Flacco, 1 second. I want to jump in here.
Anybody else in Dominica?
Flacco, can you hear me?
Go on. Go ahead.
Can you hear me? Let me jump in here, because I don't want to. I have 2 hours. We have 2 hours. We pretty much done with 1 hour. I don't want us to belabor this thing to the extent that we are. Those are valid points. That there are folks in the country who have had legitimate grievances and who have tried various avenues to let their grievances be heard, and they're feeling ignored. So that question of, man, I pay you for free bread, you only give me 2, where's my other bread? Is that analogy? So for example, we had the Prime Minister say, hold on. We had the Prime Minister say that elections should be fought on policies, on performance, and within the law. And that statement neglects to acknowledge that for the last 10, 12 years, many people in the country, including the Prime Minister himself, has acknowledged the need for better conduction of our elections. And so folks have tried within the law, folks have tried with policy, addressing policy, and folks have tried in terms of performance, and we still don't get it. What I'm getting from Flacco, and Flacco, you can tell me if I'm misquoting you, is that you decided to run as an independent, one, to buy more time for the movement, because if nobody had stood up against the Labour Party, on Monday they would have been declared the winner, and they would have formed a new government, and then that's what we would be facing right now. And in the absence of a clear strategy as to the way forward from the major political parties, some persons had no choice but to decide to stand up on their own as independent. Because what Flacco was saying is last week Thursday, a couple thousand people gathered on the Bayfront, and there were some pep talks, and then they were said, "Thank you very much for coming, get home safely." And in that kind of environment, there was a vacuum of clear-cut strategy or instructions as to what are the next steps, what is the aim, what is the objective. So the very same question that Justin just asked Flacco, which is, what do you hope to achieve by standing up as an independent? It wasn't quite clear to a lot of folks how, not standing up, what were we going to do next? Were we going to go into the streets, demonstrate? Who were the alliances? Did we have the unions on board, and all of those things? And so this is where we are. 12 independent candidates put their names up and are duly nominated for the elections. We get a lot of pushback. There's a lot of folks who believe that should not have happened, that the objective was to let the Labour Party go in uncontested, and once they go uncontested, the government would have been declared illegitimate, and they would have had no standing in the eyes of everybody because they were not contested. But the question is, once you've done that, what is it that you would have achieved? And that is what was not clearly answered as the next step. And that is why so many people in that vacuum, in that uncertainty, decided, you know what, let's hedge our bets and let's step in so that this will buy some more time. I'm going to take a quick break to get some words from our sponsors because we've exhausted 1 hour. When I come back, I'm going to come back to Flacco, and I want to ask him the question in a different way. Are you hoping to get elected to Parliament so that makes you a serious candidate with a real dog in the fight?
I don't want to.
Are you hoping to get elected? Or are
I
we
want
still
direct
in the
electoral reform, and I want respect for the common man.
Flacco, let's take a quick break. When I come back, I'm going to let you answer that.
Tony, let me just give you one. Yeah.
No. Let's answer that as soon as we come back. But that's my first question when we come back.
Yeah.
My fellow constituents, my name is Tyro Nicholas, a network administrator and activist with the Moonsewe organization. Presently, due to the contentious situation in which we have found ourselves, and with a solemn conscience and sense of duty to my community, I offer myself as an option to you. It is my wish to use the time between now and December 6th to demonstrate the kind of leadership and representation that I expect for myself and every single one of you. Not just from the Prime Minister, but from each and every individual who has presented and dedicated themselves to public service. When I reflect on the events which have led me to this point, the old adage, if you want something done right, roll up your sleeves and do it yourself, comes to mind. We have accepted mandate after mandate from representatives who have failed to deliver. Among these promises is a promise for electoral reform, a promise which has devolved into an almost contemptuous issue. But with your help, I intend to prove, firstly, not just to us, but to our children, that we have the power and the choice to demand better for ourselves and to change the direction of our lives. And that if we resign ourselves to lining up and hanging our hearts on promises that are never fulfilled, we are basically saying that we have given up on our own abilities. So I am using this time to ensure that absolutely no empty promises will be given to my fellow constituents. I offer myself to ensure a fair chance to others, despite the fact that those who have the means refuse the electoral reforms that will ensure I have a fair chance to represent you. My fellow constituents, we are not figments of imagination. We are not just ideas in a man's head. We are real people with hopes and dreams and needs to fulfill. And I believe it is time that we are treated as real people. Because Dominica, and more importantly to me, Roseau North is a real place. We will be coming to the various communities to meet with our people on all sides and from all parties. Now is the time for unity. While others seek to divide us for their benefit, I seek to unite us for ours. Thank you.
Okay. So, you understand why I wanted to take the break before you answer. Let's talk about it, because the reality we face is the reality we face. That's why I wanted to take a break from the back and forth, because we understand your passion. Talk to us. You are the independent candidate for the Roseau North constituency. What is the ideal outcome? What is the objective? What is this? Well, I don't want you to reveal your strategy in public, but tell us what the aim is, that you can tell us.
What is the objective?
Mm-hmm.
My objective is to bring back representation of the people and not self-interest. Look at me. I look nice in my suit, right?
You do.
Even in my young man. I was looking good, right?
Mm-hmm.
For the people who know me day to day, you know, they know this. Anybody can do this. Anybody can put a suit on, a long sleeve, and, you know, shape up themselves and present themselves as, you know, clean as a whistle. But you cannot see what is the intent of that person. These days, we because we see a person present themselves in a certain way, we just apply the title of honorable to them without them having any kind of honorable behavior. You know, do we understand what it is to be honorable? Does honor have any value in our society anymore? Because to me, that is what representation is honoring the people that you serve. I have no money. I just have been fortunate to be in the position where all eyes are on me, and I'm using this to represent what I expect from people who represent not just me, but people in general. Without even having a campaign and finance for a campaign, I was able to go to the one or two of the people in the industrial estate and interact with them, let them know some of the issues that are going on with the community. I don't expect a power rep to come and shove money in my hand when I explain to him issues that are affecting me in my community. I don't want to fix for myself. I want to fix to address issues that affect everybody. You know, our relationships are being devalued by that love of money, and they say the love of money is the root of all evil. And we don't see that we are abandoning each other, and our people are being isolated so they can be victimized. And all of this is because of self-interest and non-representation. That's why I said that between this nomination day and December 6th, I intend to demonstrate what I expect from my leaders.
Let me ask you this. Was it necessary for you to be an independent candidate, for you to go to that area, which you call your constituency, Roseau North, and explain to people what your expectations are, what your leaders should be doing? Do you need to be a candidate for you to be able to express yourself in that
so Justin,
I want to ask you a question.
Hold on, Flaco.
If I wasn't a candidate, you think I would be here now?
Yeah. So I'm not. Hold on, Justin. Let me address that question a little bit because sometimes it's better if somebody else speaks for you. Okay.
Yeah.
Flaco and Buju and Maggie and those guys, the guys of Moonsewe, for the last 3 or 4 years before the last election anyway, have been going around the country. They used to go to different communities every Sunday or Saturday, and they would hold meetings on the square, and they would talk about those very same issues. They would set up a PA system. They would talk about those very same issues. Even up till today, on a Monday night, Munsewie does a live broadcast bringing attention to the issues. So the answer is yes. Flacco and Buju being candidates in the election have definitely given them a different platform. Raise the profile in the awareness of people to stop and listen to what they're saying. So there's no doubt about that. I think Flacco will bear us out. He will confirm. I'm sure that when he went to the businesses in the industrial estate, he got a different reception and reaction as Flacco the candidate versus Flacco a member of Munsewie. So I think that is the answer to that. But, go ahead, Flacco.
Yeah. One letter.
Ahead, that's
all it took. One letter. And yes, so I was saying one letter is all it took. And that is what representation is. Just imagine this. We have called an election when the only preschool in one of the communities in Rosenhof has been housed for 6 years in the polling station. And nobody said anything. If that doesn't say that we have a breakdown in the relationships and that we essentially have lost what we call a community, then I don't know what will say to us, what will speak to us. Because you are telling the people that they have to, so that you can use this place, which it is for, and they have a facility there. All it needs is a roof. And like I've said, I've gone to the business community, and they have made the commitment that if we are able to raise 50%, that they will match it, and we will be able to do that. So, and I'm not even elected into any position. I'm just saying that anybody is able to represent, but representation has to be defined as service, a selfless service. It's not, it's not for self. And that is what statesmanship is. Statesmanship is not about having so much money and all of these things. It's about when you leave, what have you left behind that continues to be of the benefit to other generations. And that is legacy.
Right.
And we need to begin speaking about legacy.
Right. So
not just political legacy, but as a nation.
Justin, let me come to you. You hear the young man, you see the passion, you see the motivation, but we also see the intransience of the incumbent government. With a situation where the election had gone uncontested, or let's say the election still goes uncontested. Let's say the independent candidates were to withdraw and say, well, this was just to buy us time. We're not going through the election, whatever. And that new government comes in unchallenged, and they form the government. From a legal point of view, what are the logical next steps that are available to challenge a government in that situation?
None really.
Is what?
I say there are none really. Because if the opportunity is given for persons to put themselves forward as candidates and they do not, then it simply means that the party that puts the slate of full candidates then becomes duly the government, in quotation marks, elected, but they're not really elected since there was no vote. But they would automatically become members of parliament. And from the members of parliament, the president then chooses a prime minister who will then choose his ministers to form the government. So that will proceed nonetheless. But the question which I think needs to be asked is, why would the Prime Minister, 2.5 years before elections are constitutionally due, call for elections, particularly at a time when you have Sir Dennis Byron having been appointed to review the electoral system in conformity with criticism by both the OAS and the Commonwealth organizations, who themselves have come to Dominica and viewed the whole election process. Why would you do that? To what end? I ask. And that is where I see the process is. I understand Flacco's point, because what he's basically saying is that as a candidate, I think I have a bigger platform. People will more listen, people will more accept my my talk, my speaks on the matter, and because they will see me as a potential member of parliament, even though I know that is not going to happen, but at least I'm putting myself forward so that I have a bigger and a wider platform. And I think this basically is what he's saying. But maybe he may do just as you have suggested, that the day before elections, pull himself out and says, I'm no longer a candidate and I will not contest, because I know what is inevitable. And I have done my share of alerting and awakening people to the poor leadership as well as the issues that face us as a country.
But I guess what I was asking though, which you answered, is that when the election is boycotted and the government is formed, there's no recourse. We're basically depending on the shame or whatever, but if men are dishonorable, they may not have any shame or conscience.
It will be the government of the day. But one thing they do not have or will not have is the moral authority. They will have the legal authority, but the moral authority, because in a democracy, your moral authority comes in with voting or with having an election which is competitive, so that the people choose one party from the other parties that are participating. But if there's only one party participating, it really makes a mockery of the system. And although legally you form the government, morally speaking, you really are not in as good a shape as you would have been had there been an election. And I think not only within the country, but I think regionally and internationally, that is a burden that will have to be borne by the government.
Not just by the government, not just by the government, but by the region as well, because they allowed it to happen, and it's going to cause a lot of discomfort in the region, because you say that they don't have the moral authority. Well, there are people who are looking for governments with no moral authority, and that is what they're banking on. People with as much as they have to lose to get in bed with. So are we really saying that we will have this government that we don't recognize but are acknowledged by all rogue governments or dictatorships
organizations and governments and international community? Yeah.
What did you say, Justin?
No, I'm just following what he says. Yes, it's a government that will be recognized regionally, internationally by organizations, because it is the government.
Exactly.
Right.
It is the government. But the moral authority really is not there. And that makes a difference, to my mind.
Right. So Flacco, in that context, okay, what if we were to imagine for a minute that that you were elected and you became the leader of the opposition, what take that thought and and bring it forward for us. You would be going to Parliament as leader of the opposition because you're probably the only person on the opposition side that win. You actually have a good chance of winning because you are in one of the few constituencies, Roseau North, where the ruling party is not popular. Well, let's say not popular, that one of the seats were at the last election. I don't think they're any more popular now than they were then. And you are really stepping forward and doing visibility. If let's say if you were able to mitigate any fraudulent activity with the elections, and you were elected, you could very well be leader of opposition and with some appointed senators and that sort of thing. Is that a scenario that's playing out in your mind?
There is something I've thought of it, but not in a lot of detail, because essentially what I feel is that we need to come to the place where everybody in Dominica understands. Okay, you see, we have a saying that blessed are the peacemakers, and we have to take note of that. Blessed are the peacemakers, and we have people who hide behind that statement. Blessed are the peacemakers. Whenever we talk about violence and we talk about demonstration and we talk about those things, they come out with that, blessed are the peacemakers. These very people do not equate a violation to violence, they don't put it on the same scale, because the key word of violence is violate. And anywhere you violate people, you must expect that people will respond, and sometimes violently. So that is why in the halls of our parliament, which our parliament is essentially a house of debate, and even within the human body, there are two sides. You sometimes you are at war with yourself. You wonder if you should or if you should not. So why in the highest house where we make decisions on a national level should there not be two sides to debate and to give merit and credence to the various arguments so that we choose the best path forward? And I think, I keep saying that our prime minister taught me at college. He's an English lecturer. He has a good command of the English language. So he understands the relationship between violate and violence. And we must not make that mistake. This is not a common man on the street. He's an intelligent man holding the highest office in our country. And he must be held accountable. He must be held to some standard. Why must I come out of the gutter? Because I know all what everybody have to say about it. I know myself, and that's why I stand so boldly. Because there's nothing anybody can say about me that I don't know about myself. But if I can find the moral authority to stand and to speak to the highest office in my country in the way that I speak in now, then that should be an indicator to every Dominican. When the rat have to come out in the gutter to speak to you, you think that you will build a mansion and your community will go into poverty and it will be rat infested, and you will not have rats in your house too? You will have rats in your house too. You will never be able to build a palace on the hill and watch everything around you go down into poverty. We will not survive. That is not the environment for us to thrive. And if we want to prosper and to thrive as a people, we need unity. We need to put down the weapon of the oppressor, which is to divide and conquer. It has been working from time and it's still working now. We need to understand that this is not just a political issue that we have. We are at a moment in our national history when we are saying to the world whether there is morality and ethics in our politics. We are making a statement to the world. How are we as Dominican to be treated? And I think
I hear that. So Flaco,
but let me also make a comment. because Flaco makes, he has made a good point in terms of within ourselves. There sometimes are internal fights, as to whether we should do this or whether we should not, which we should do that. And we ourselves have to come to terms with that. So I think in like manner, the opposition within a parliament also performs a duty and has a right to be able to express themselves, not see themselves only as a party ready to put out the government, but as a party giving the alternative side so that the government itself can rethink or at least justify its actions in the face of criticisms coming from the opposition party and suggestions that certain things should be done in a particular way. So that really is the essence of democracy. You need both sides. They both must make the contribution towards debate, towards national growth, towards national development. And that is essential. And that is why I say that non-participation by the opposition leaves the government of the day, when it is formed, without moral authority, because they will find themselves in a parliament where there is no official opposition, and that is how they're going to be operate. Unfortunately, they may well find themselves doing whatever they want to as a result. But with people like you, Flaco, out on the streets and talking, informing, educating, and assisting, particularly the constituency in which you live, maybe that would certainly make a difference.
So, Justin, let me ask you a question. In a situation where the government wins all 21 seats, does the Constitution address what happens in terms of having an opposition in the parliament?
Well, you will not have any opposition as such, because the government will simply, do not forget, the Barbados situation. Okay, where you have no members of the opposition, although they contested elections, winning a seat. So that your parliament really is comprised of the party in power or the party in office. And that's where we are going to find ourselves.
So
it is possible, no, 1 second, it is possible that given his ability to appoint persons to the Senate, that the Prime Minister may well advise the President to appoint persons who he knows are of a different political persuasion or view than himself, and put this up as the opposition. But in terms of your house with constituency representatives, you will not have any opposition.
Right. So the big elephant in the room is, was this strategy of no reform, no election, let's boycott the election, is that a strategy that any substance whatsoever? I mean, yes, they would be ruling with no moral authority, but we know from the last 20 years, Labour Party government has proven that they don't really care if people think that they're moral or not.
Yes, I understand that point. But the point is this, the other point that one has to take into consideration is, if you have an electoral process and system that is itself corrupt, not properly democratic, not allowing for Dominicans to exercise their democratic right in a proper manner. And we're not just saying that because you've had organizations, regional and international, who have themselves criticized the system. The government itself has accepted that the system needs to be reformed. Hence the reason why Sir Dennis Byron was appointed as a one-man commission. And here you have Sir Dennis Byron writing a letter to the leader of the opposition, which is dated the very day that, or the day following the Prime Minister's announcement of elections, indicating the process which he intends utilizing towards achieving the reform that everybody has been asking for. The letter was written on the 6th of November, which was the very Sunday that the Prime Minister made his announcement. And Sir Dennis wrote after meeting with the opposition, with the Electoral Commission, with the Prime Minister, and set out in that letter his reform in respect of the registration of electors as phase 1, and with respect to the election process as phase 2. And he expected that phase 1 would be completed during the month of November, this very month. And phase 2 would be completed between February and March of 2023. What was therefore the hurry to call elections 2.5 years before it was constitutionally due, in the face of reform being implemented?
And so you're thinking that in a situation like that, the government would have a hard time remaining in office for 5 years?
You mean what? The government, if it's elected,
if
or
the government went in uncontested and they have all 21 seats and they form the parliament, that you think that lack of moral authority would be sufficient weight on the government to force them to have electoral reform and elections before 5 years?
Well, I really don't know whether they may take that moral stand that seriously. But I'm hoping that the process of the electoral reform will continue, that Sir Dennis Barry will continue doing what he's doing, so that by the time the next election is called, the process would have been reformed and other parties would be able to fully participate in respect of a general election and bring back some credibility to governance within Dominica.
Yes.
All right. I have to take a quick commercial break here. It's 8:30. I'm going to take that. When you come back, Flacco, I want you to tell us a little more about your campaign, and if there's any assistance that you need from the audience, let's go there. Justin, we're also going to talk about what's next. You know, we have the opinion of the Caribbean Court of Justice. We have the draft reports from Dennis Byron. We have all these previous reports. What is it that Dominicans can do that doesn't walk a road towards violence, that can extract us and put us on a different path? Quick commercial break, and we'll be right back, listeners.
Greetings, listeners and viewers. This is Merlin the Wizard St. Hilaire, former Calypso King of Dominica. Please join me and the host of the program Dissect on Saturday, November 26th at 7 p.m. Eastern Standard. See you then. You then.
My fellow constituents, my name is Tyron Nicholas, a network administrator and activist with the Moonseway organization. Presently, due to the contentious situation in which we have found ourselves, and with a solemn conscience and sense of duty to my community, I offer myself as an option to you. It is my wish to use the time between now and December 6th to demonstrate the kind of leadership and representation that I expect for myself and every single one of you. Not just from the Prime Minister, but from each and every individual who has presented and dedicated themselves to public service. When I reflect on the events which have led me to this point, the old adage, if you want something done right, roll up your sleeves and do it yourself, comes to mind. We have accepted mandate after mandate from representatives who have failed to deliver. Among these promises is a promise for electoral reform, a promise which has devolved into an almost contemptuous issue. But with your help, I intend to prove, firstly, not just to us, but to our children, that we have the power and the choice to demand better for ourselves and to change the direction of our lives. And that if we resign ourselves to lining up and hanging our hearts on promises that are never fulfilled, we are basically saying that we have given up on our own abilities. So I am using this time to ensure that absolutely no empty promises will be given to my fellow constituents. I offer myself to ensure a fair chance to others, despite the fact that those who have the means refuse the electoral reforms that will ensure I have a fair chance to represent you. My fellow constituents, we are not figments of imagination. We are not just ideas in a man's head. We are real people with hopes and dreams and needs to fulfill. And I believe it is time that we are treated as real people. Because Dominica, and more importantly to me, Roseau North is a real place. We will be coming to the various communities to meet with our people on all sides and from all parties. Now is the time for unity. While others seek to divide us for their benefit, I seek to unite us for ours. Thank you.
All right. So we are back, listeners. Tonight, if you've been with us, we had a 2-hour special on the elections in Dominica. My guest tonight is Justin Simon. He's an attorney at law practicing currently in Antigua, and Tyrone Nicholas, Flacco, as we call him affectionately, who has stood up as an independent candidate, one of 12 independent candidates who stood up at the last minute and got nominated into the last election. An election that was not contested by major opposition party, United Workers' Party, which is really the only main party. There are some other parties there, but they haven't shown up in the last few elections. The Dominica Freedom Party, there's APP, and there is Team Unity Dominica. Actually, 5 of those independent candidates is reported affiliated with the Team Unity Dominica. And so the question is, Dominica has been existing in an environment where there's so much evidence and so much report that the election process is flawed. The government controls all of the resources associated with the election. The media, the purses of the country, the money from the country, seem to be used by the party in power to further their own candidates. The electoral list, I understand that this current list has 73,000 people on that list, whereas our population in Dominica, by all accounts, shrinking. If you've been in Dominica recently, every community that you've been in, there are very few, hardly any community that is of the same size population-wise as when you were young and growing up. And so how can it be that our population is increasing? We don't have all the actual data because I guess government doesn't release the census results the way they should. But by all accounts, the population is shrinking, but the list of electors is increasing. There are so many areas that have been asked for, and it is called electoral reform. But to me, most of the demands that are being made is not necessarily reform; it's more enforcement of the existing laws. The cleaning of the list is well provided for in the existing list, in the existing laws. The way that the resources are supposed to be shared in terms of access to the media and those things are well established. And so most of the demands that are being made are not necessarily, are not what I would call electoral reform. It's just a demand to enforce the laws that's on the book. There is need for reform, because our process antiquated. There's no way of actually confirming somebody's identity. I can show up in St. Joe and say that I am Bernard Drago, a brother who lived in St. Joe, and nobody can challenge me and say you're not Bernard Drago. I understand that there are, and maybe Justin will clarify it for us, there are ways in which representatives of the various parties can challenge somebody to vote. They cannot prevent them from voting. They can challenge them, and that person has to do an affidavit or some things of that sort. But they cannot prevent them, stop them from voting, if what I understand. But in an environment like that, and with even the highest court saying that Dominica should not go into election without these issues being addressed, and the issues of a voters list being fundamental to an election that is perceived as free and fair, where elections are central to the survival of a democracy. And so we have the situation where a few people stepped up and said, I don't think it would be good for the country if we only allowed the Labour Party to go in with nobody else on the ballot, and therefore right now they would be the government. Justin, I want to go to you first with that. Once an election like that takes place, and the list that was used for the election, there are flaws that can be identified with it and various other nefarious activities. Is there an avenue for citizens to then go to court and challenge the legitimacy of the government who got into office by what is considered to be the use of a tainted list and other tainted processes associated? Is there an avenue for the courts to challenge a sitting government and after the fact declare an election null and void because it didn't follow proper procedure?
Yes and no. There is a process where you file an election petition, but that would be in respect not of the government, but in respect of the particular constituencies in which you think that the electoral register was not a proper or correct one, so that it is the particular constituency representative. You would challenge his either election or appointment. Well, not appointment, but election, if there's an election. That is what you would be, that's what you would be basically doing, and it's a petition. So that is an avenue which can be utilized. The problem, of course, is that you've got to look at the full picture, because you have 21 constituencies. How many of these constituencies can you properly challenge to effect a breakdown of the government? You follow me? That is the issue that you face. I mean, take, for example, following the last elections, the opposition brought a legal action in the magistrate's court in respect of treating things which they alleged that the Labour Party had done to influence voters in their direction. That was challenged in the High Court by the Labour Party as to whether or not the opposition had that right. The matter went up to the Court of Appeal and then finally to the CCJ, which ruled that the offense of treating, and which involved quite a number of the ministers of government, can be brought before the magistrate's court. And when that came to be heard before the magistrate's court, the director of public prosecution stepped in, took over the prosecution, and determined that the matter should not the prosecution should not proceed. Now, the DPP has that power and that right under the Constitution, because prosecution really is the remit of the Director of Public Prosecutions and the police. So the Constitution allows the DPP to either take over or be part and parcel. And here you have a situation where the CCJ, as your apex court, says, yes, you can proceed before the magistrate's court. The matter is now before the magistrate's court, and the day before the hearing of the matter, the DPP then says, I'm taking over and I am withdrawing the prosecution. Now, that is the background that we face and we've got to look at. So if with respect to legal actions, which may be taken before the court, they have a limited effect, because there has to be a certain amount of respect for the rule of law for those matters to really have a fundamental effect. And in the absence of that, you find yourself back into square one.
But just in a situation like that, can the CCJ, the Caribbean Court of Justice, which is the apex court as it's referred to, can you look at that action by the DPP and do anything about it? Their hands are tied?
No, the apex court cannot. Your court can only act when you bring an action before the court, so that we would then have had to challenge the DPP's action before the High Court. It may well have to go before the Court of Appeal, because whichever side loses would appeal, and then whichever side loses on the Court of Appeal would go up to the apex court, the CCJ. So it's another long process, if you follow me.
Which should have been taken. I believe, well, it should have been taken.
One has to look at it, because sometimes you get very frustrated in respect of matters of that nature, when you realize that the government or the party in power deliberately, intentionally, and with malice proceeds to obstruct the normal course of things happening. Because I can tell you that the DPP took that action, but before the DPP took that action, the lawyers who were representing the Labour Party had actually written to the DPP asking her to interfere and to get the matter dismissed. That's the situation which you face. So
right,
there comes a time when you tell yourself, to what end? To what end do I continue with this fight non-stop? Because that takes time, it takes money, it takes commitment. And how far do you go, and to achieve what?
So my position is that we do not have the luxury to be frustrated. I think that if that was challenged and it got to the apex court, and the apex court ruled that the magistrate acted inappropriately or obstructed the normal course of justice, right now, when there's a new election and a case is brought, it would stymie the enthusiasm with which another director of public prosecution would decide to step in and do the same thing all over again. Because then you'll have precedent.
There is that possibility, but then there's also the possibility that the Prime Minister may have determined, let me call elections immediately to get rid of that. Just as he's done now. He could have done it earlier, because the Constitution allows him
but
to call
nevertheless,
within the 5-year period.
So would that have caused the case to die if the DPP was no longer in office?
Oh well, do not forget what they were challenging was the last elections. That was what, 20
The last election, 2019.
2019.
Right.
So that if the Prime Minister decides, while that matter is being processed throughout, let me now call elections, it would basically end that court action. It would make it academic, because the whole idea behind the court action was to for the court to make a decision that yes, there was cheating, and therefore the various candidates who won their seats would now lose their seats as a result of the court action. But if you call a new election, it means that the old election is all past.
But what I'm saying is that the action, apart from what the action of the DPP itself, could have been challenged in that sense, no?
Well, yes.
So that the ruling would be on the action of the DPP, not necessarily.
Yes. Yeah. Yes, it could have been challenged and go through the whole. That's what I'm saying, and it would have maybe possibly gone through the whole process again, because if they took that step to influence the DPP so to act, then they would certainly fight it right up to the CCJ again. And at the end of the day, the Prime Minister still has that power and authority to call elections, so that he dissolves Parliament, so that proceeding before the Magistrates Court in respect of the treating becomes academic.
Academic. Okay. All right.
You follow me? So I think it's all of these things one has to take into account.
Yeah. Yeah.
And you know, it is a frustrating exercise, without a doubt.
And it's an exercise that pushes us more towards violations being met with violence or some other type of disruption when folks feel like there's no recourse, because one set holds all the cards. But Flacco, we're almost out of time. I want to give you the opportunity to talk about your candidacy. To folks see you, they see your passion. You say you have no campaign, you have no platform. Not that you have no platform in the sense that you have some very strong planks and beliefs that you stand for in your belief, which you bring to your candidacy. But talk about it. What are some of the things? First of all, which are the communities that's in your constituency, and what are you asking folks to do?
Well, my campaign. Well, I decided to start my campaign in Fonkole, which is one of the communities further north, not the most northern, but I chose to start there. Chose to identify at least one common issue, not just focused on one person, one individual, because I want to do something that will impact as many people as possible. So I've identified places like I was saying, the re-roofing of the Little Explorer preschool in Fonkole. And then over in Stock Farm, we have the young people who are asking for employment opportunities. They've even said that the sports complex was promised. They were promised that the abandoned sports complex would have been refurbished, so that they could enter there and maybe have some kind of economic activity, small business ventures going on in there. But the plans were drawn up, and apparently a campaign poster has been plastered over the billboard with those plans. So I guess we have to do that on our own in Stock Farm. In Yampis, we have people who are, into the sports, and young men especially, who are asking for support with their football clubs and so. And the public conveniences to be repaired. We have in Gotha, we have the same situation as well. And I'm focusing next week to really meet with the people in the Goodwill community, Gotha, Goodwill, Upper Goodwill, Center Roma, and Pottersville area. And I want to end my campaign trail in Mont Daniel, because that is where I live. That is where I have lived for the past 30 years. And in Mount Daniel, we have no recreational space, and it's a growing community, and our children hardly have an area where they can come together and engage and get to know each other, because that is what community essentially is people with a common relationship. And I'm hoping that we can bring some of the other communities, members of the other communities, to walk through, visit the other areas and get familiar with, but like I said, I trying to push all of this between now and the 6th. It's a drive for awareness of basically what we need to do for ourselves, and how we are able to manage that by building relationships with the people who do business in our communities. So it's part community and fundraising, and part business engagement, bridging that gap.
There's a lot to do, Flaco. Well, in terms of resources, if somebody wants to, even if it's just to go to the communities and meet with people, you name about 6 different communities. If somebody wanted to contribute to that effort, do you have anything in place to take donations?
Well, I can only give my PayPal for now. I maybe can
okay, go ahead.
My mobile banking account. My PayPal address is Tyrone7k@gmail.com.
Tyrone7k@gmail.com. Okay.
Yeah. And embedding mobile banking information, Tyrone F. Nicholas, Daniel, account number 1000123.
Say that again more slowly, please.
Also, you can reach me at 614-2589, and you see, value is not just in money. Value is in relationship. So if we know people who might be able to offer not just their money, but their expertise, their experience in helping to meet some of the issues that we and I intend to keep fostering those relationships even after the 6 years. What it is, because that is to, if you've seen what true representation is, I intend to embody that for the time I have the awareness of the rest of the.
Repeat your phone number so Sam can scroll it on the screen so folks can have a chance to write it down. 767.
It's 767-614-2589.
Okay. So Flaco, I wish you all the best. And I want to say that I admire you, what you do, standing up. In life, you will do things that not everybody, it's impossible to get everybody to agree and support. And at the end of the day, as you said, as an independent person, you have to think independently for yourself. And I admire the fact that you thought independently for yourself and you took independent action. And so I wish you all the best. We are available as a medium through which you can get your message out. Feel free to reach back out to us. And thank you so much for coming. Justin, I want to go to you.
Well, let me say, before you go, let me say to Flaco too, that I wish him all the best. He sounds very emotional and firm in respect of what his aim is. And what I would also suggest is that even after the elections, he continues doing what he's doing, bonding with people within that constituency, maybe even forming a group, so that whatever issues you have, you could also bring it to the attention of whoever becomes the constituency representative. So you continue to be an active participant in the progress of your community.
I have offered the challenge to I've offered the challenge to my opponents that wherever they are able to help the people, I will not speak in that direction. So
Yes.
it's all about the community, and when we can make politics is a game essentially, but the game has to be about development, and there has to be some kind of sportsmanship. If in a house, if you have two parents who are always at each other's fruits, ready to devour each other, the outcome for the children will never be good. But we need to have a house, especially a house of debate, where we have two parties who are able to articulate ideas and allow ideas to contend and to advance based on merit, and it will only augur for the benefit of every generation. And I think that is the
Indeed.
direction that I want to see our country go, and I'm doing my part to have it go that way.
You're totally correct. I congratulate you, and please continue.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for that. Justin, you as well. I thank you so much for taking the time to be with us for 2 hours. You did shed some light on quite a few areas in terms of options, in terms of the Constitution, in terms of what's available legally, and the frustration that practitioners of the law are facing. I'm going to give you the opportunity to make some brief closing remarks in those regards.
Okay, thank you very much. It really is unfortunate where we have reached in terms of development in Dominica. But I also want to say that the opposition itself forms an important part and parcel of the governing structure. So that if you have a one-party government, it really is not going to inure to the benefit of Dominicans. The system which the Constitution envisages is that you will have a party that forms the government and a party that forms the opposition. Debate in Parliament in respect of issues, and not for the purpose simply of criticizing, because too often we see the opposition simply as opposing everything. But there must be some good in respect of what may be suggested by the opposition, and that must be taken into consideration. And I would say also that in respect of criticizing government, the opposition should be constructive in respect of the criticism and not just destructive, so that, just as Flaco says, each part or each party plays a part in respect of informing, educating, and developing the population towards a better and more viable Dominica.
Yeah.
Great.
So thank you very much for that opportunity. And, I just wish everybody well. You have mentioned the issue of possible violence every so often, but I think that we should certainly steer away from. But the authorities must also recognize the people's right to demonstrate and to express themselves once it's being done in a peaceful manner.
Yes, and by violence, I don't necessarily mean bodily harm to anybody. But certainly, if you are always like for example, on Thursday night, the opposition forces wanted to call their groups. They told them between 3 p.m. and 7 p.m. And you have to be in that position on the bayfront, and you have to be done by that time. And so on Thursday, Dominica operated as normal. Folks came down. There were a few people gave some pep rally speeches. And then they were told, thank you for coming, go home. And then Dominica opened for business as usual on Friday. Nominations went on. Now, if you have a government that cares about the people, that is sufficient, because they say, what, boy, there are so many people that showed up. This is a real concern for our people. Let's address it. Let's take it to account. But when you have a government that doesn't care or doesn't appear to care, then unless there's a disruption, you just get ignored. And so the government will say, well, you have Q95, call them and complain to Matt. Every 3 months we give you, every Wednesday you walk, but we don't allow you to even come within a stone's throw of financial center or government headquarters. And so people are putting out this effort to raise a flag and say, hey, we have a concern over here. But how long can you wave a flag if you continue to be ignored? So it's not that I am advocating anything violent. I am just saying that without a valve, without people feeling that there is a place where their grievances are given serious consideration, it will get escalated. It will get escalated.
Frustration and anger will set in.
Will set in. It will escalate.
Yes.
You know, so we want to avoid that. We want to avoid that, and to avoid that, it means that folks have to feel that they're being taken seriously.
Yes.
Flacco, I see you want to have a last word, so let's have that last word before we go out.
Well, interestingly, we have a close relationship with the Chinese, and one of the quotations in the Chinese Art of War is that the greatest victory we can have is the victory that we win without firing a single blow, without firing a single bullet. So there's really no need for the violence, you know. What we have to understand is that we need to work together to get that majority. And the majority is not, we are not building a majority per se for use of force, but when the majority of the people are aware that they are being shortchanged, essentially, then they will start to demand better. And once we start to collectively demand better together as one voice, we become a majority and not a majority to contend with. And that is the kind of shift that we need to happen in our society, is a total revolution and an awakening of consciousness. So when the people who are asleep realize that really, hey, this path we are on is a path to nowhere, it's not sustainable, and we need to begin, and that's what we've been saying for the past few days, is that we need to forgive each other. We need to forgive our brothers and sisters for being led astray, for being at an earlier stage in their development, because I can tell you, I wasn't always at this point in my thinking and my political maturity and I wasn't always at that point. There will always be people who are further back or and some who are further ahead. But it's the duty of those who are further ahead not to abandon those who have not been able to catch up, but to reach out and to bring them up to speed, because we're going to need them. It's better to have them on our side than to be fighting against them, and the only way that we're going to unite is when we put down our colors. Just before I go, on Thursday, I was going to say to the crowd, just look at how I going to command the police, and it could have any party affiliation there, any color, creed could have been there, any office, any national could have been there. I would have asked for silence, and I would have raised the Dominican flag, and I would have started to sing the anthem. And by that act, I would have commanded everybody there, no matter their political color, no matter what hat and role they wear in our society. So that is what the common understanding has to come down to. When all of the water has evaporated and we come down to the salt of it, it's one flag, one nation, one.
I think that is as good a place as any to live it. One flag, one nation, one people.
One people.
And I would add to that, one common aspiration. And so what we're asking for is equal opportunity and equal access to those opportunities. And so, Flacco, I want to thank you once again for coming out. Justin, you as well. I appreciate both of your time. We had a really engaging discussion. I believe that my viewers and audience are more educated than they were before. Flacco has articulated why, even though he believed in no reform, no election, he saw it necessary to step into the fray and to defer that formation of the government by a couple of weeks to give us some more time to wrap our heads and to think about it properly. We see that there was a vacuum in leadership on the opposition side. Nobody has really stepped forward in an authoritative way to help to elucidate what exactly is the plan, what do we do, how do we proceed. And I think Flacco has outlined some really good points tonight. Let us reach across the aisle to our fellow Dominicans and try to educate them and bring them along. Let us make the people in position understand the type and quality of representation that we expect from them. And let them understand in no uncertain terms that we expect them to behave honorable if they are given the title of honorable so and so. There should be honor in their behavior. And so, gentlemen, I want to thank you so much. To all my listeners and viewers, thank you so much for staying with us for the 2 hours and a little bit. Flacco, I wish you all the best. Folks, support him. We need young men like this. When I hear this young man speak, it evaporates much of the hopelessness that you feel when you just see, the constant frustration of all the processes. Because even in that environment, and probably because of that environment, we can produce young men like Flacco, very articulate, very thoughtful, and very courageous and brave. And so,
with a sense of purpose.
Yes, I put it to you that all is not lost. There is plenty of hope, because Flacco is not alone. He comes with brothers, and there are other brothers and sisters that are not as yet up front and speaking, but they're acting. And so I want to say all the best for the rest of the campaign. I wish you full energy and full steam ahead. And Justin, I'm sure we'll be reaching out to you even more as we move along for some clarity and guidance, and which you provide so well and so calmly. And so once again, good night, everybody. And thank you for this wonderful experience.
Have a pleasant evening, and thank you very much to all.
Thank you. Thank you, everybody.